So hello and welcome. I'm here, this is Tony Nec from the Colour of Sound Institute. I'm here this evening with Jane, my wife, who's also presenting this webinar with me. So welcome. On this webinar, we're going to be talking about and demonstrating also how to work with a number of instruments, including the Tibetan bell, the tingshas, Balinese bells, chimes, and similar instruments for one-to-one work, for group work, and also for energy and space clearing and balancing as well. So what we'll be doing is, in a few minutes, I'll start with a talk and some slides. And while I'm doing that, Jane's going to be playing some of the instruments quietly in the background. So you'll get a bit of an auditory experience of that. And then when I finish that, then Jane's going to do a talk separately about her experiences with energy and space clearing, particularly space clearing. She's done quite a lot of work with that over the years, professionally paid work. So that should be really interesting as well for you to hear. And then there'll be time for questions and answers about anything that we're covering here on this webinar, or in fact anything about sound therapy generally. So what we'll do is we'll be able to pick up the questions and any comments that you're making as we go along. So I hope you enjoy it. This should be good. And of course, there will be a replay available of this afterwards. We are recording this, so the replay will be available, and also I'll be making a copy of these slides available as well. Now we have updated and put in some new content with these slides, so hopefully this will be interesting and enjoyable for you. So you're all set to go, Jane?
I'm all set.
That's good. That's good. Would you like to just say a few words just now, just to say hello to people?
Well, hello. Well, as Tony said, I'm going to do a short talk later on based on some of the professional work I've done in space clearing, and some of it was space clearing to do with what I just called a bit of negative energy, and some of it was more to do with the fact the house was haunted by something. But I'll talk more about that later.
Great, should be really exciting and very interesting for people. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the screen now and put it over to the screen share so we can watch the slides, and then we'll get going with that. So please, write in any comments, any questions you've got as we go along. We'll pick them up at the end of the slideshow. It will last about 30 to 40 minutes. So it's not a really long one, and then Jane will be talking for 10-15 minutes or so as well at the end. So great. So enjoy it. So here we go. I'm just getting the slides set to go. Here we go. Fantastic. So I'm just getting all the different recording devices set up, and then we'll get started. Okay, so welcome to this sound therapy training webinar. We're covering bells, chimes, harmony balls, and tingshas for assessing, clearing, and balancing. So my name's Tony Nec, and I'm here with Jane Satchwell. So what are we going to cover exactly on this webinar? So first of all, we'll be looking at the different instruments. So we'll be looking at these Tibetan chimes, or otherwise known as tingshas. So these are the Tibetan little symbols, really, that they're sometimes called. The bells from Tibet, also bells from Bali and other related kinds of bells that we can get. Also harmony balls and other types of chimes as well. So we'll be covering a few different types of chimes there as part of this. So we'll be looking at how we can use these instruments to assess the quality of energy in the subtle energy fields, and then how we can also, we'll touch on how we can work with these kinds of instruments to do the energy balancing, with particular focus on the chakras. And then finally, we'll look at the next steps that you can take. So within this, we'll also be covering both energy and space clearing in rooms and buildings. We'll be looking at this both from a one-to-one, as in dealing with individual clients, and group work. So that's the types of things that you can do with either with sound bars or other kinds of work that you might do with organizations in schools and such like. So here we go. So the first thing I wanted to mention is the Tibetan symbols, or the tingshas. So now these, as with a lot of these instruments, they do come with a kind of a sacred backdrop. They've emerged out of different sacred traditions, and so the tingshas, the Tibetan bells, and so on have emerged out of essentially practices of Tibetan Buddhism. And as many of you know, I do have quite a lot of background with practices in Tibetan Buddhism over the years, and my understanding is that one of the great things about these tingshas is that they have this capacity to help to entrain our brains to enter into a meditative state, into a kind of an altered state, because they have slightly different tones in each symbol, in each side of the tingshas. And the difference in the tones is often in the region of 7 to 10 hertz. And so that's the kind of frequency that enables our brains to slow down, typically out of the beta zone into the alpha theta zone. And so it's very good for inducing this kind of relaxed meditative state, this altered state. And as a result, they're often used at the start of meditation sessions in the Buddhist tradition. And so they are great for use, particularly at the beginning of one-to-one and group sessions as well, for similar reasons. And we'll talk more about how we can use this and these other instruments for not only creating these lovely, relaxing, harmonizing sounds, but also how we can use them for assessing energy imbalances as well. So that's the Tibetan symbols, or tingshas. So we'll come back to all of this later. The next one is really the Tibetan bells, and so there are a whole variety of different sizes of bells, going up to quite large ones. And here we have a picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama outside of a Tibetan Buddhist temple, actually playing the bells as part of a prayer ceremony, in fact. And so this is quite traditionally used in Tibetan Buddhist temples and monasteries and so on. And the bells themselves are also used in the Tibetan practices. And it's quite interesting that you see the Dalai Lama here actually playing the bell by moving the pendulum, essentially, at the bottom of the bell against the side. And that is one of the ways to play them. So even without ringing the bell from side to side, it's possible to just move the pendulum bit on the inside to touch the bell, either lightly, quietly, or more loudly. So that's just one thing. Now, the Tibetan bell is often accompanied by what's called the dorji, which is the other implement that's used often in the Vajrayana, in the Yoga Tantra traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. And there's a whole lot of symbolism associated with these that we don't really need to go into just now, but it is useful to know that they're often accompanied by the chanting of mantras and by kind of hand movements as well, or mudra, that go along with it. And so we can see that these smaller Tibetan bells have a very central position within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and so have this kind of sacredness associated with them that we can draw on for the healing and the energy and space clearing work that we do. And I think, Jane, you've often used this kind of bell in in your space clearing work. Is that right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I've either used one of these bells or I've used a Tibetan bowl.
Tibetan bowl, right? Yeah. So we've covered the Tibetan bowls already, but that's great. So these can be played in different ways. So in addition to just moving the pendulum at the bottom, you can also play them by by just ringing them without a wand. That's great. So you can see how they can sound that way. And so they do hold quite a long sustain, particularly the larger bells. And this is the bell we're playing is actually the one in the photo there that you can see. And then you can play the bell by tapping it with the wand as well. So that creates a lot of lovely resonant sound and is a bit similar to playing it just by pulling or the inside pendulum, but in fact it makes a slightly more resonant sound because you're using the wooden wand as well, so it creates a really lovely quality of sound there. And then you can also create this kind of treating it a bit like a Tibetan bowl, a metal bowl. You can get the bell to sing as well. And so it's a very versatile instrument with different ways of playing, still holding the sustain there for quite a long period of time. So that's great. And similar to that, we have these Balinese bells that have emerged into the kind of the West, really through the work of Karen Kingston, who is well known. She's written various books about energy and space clearing in the context of feng shui, and we'll come on to that a bit more later. And so the Balinese bell has a different quality of sound to the Tibetan bells. And so let's just hear that for a second. Yeah, so it's a higher pitched kind of sound and also a very clear sound. And the overtones of these bells do emerge also very clearly. And so these are great for space clearing and also for assessing energy imbalances as well. So these Balinese bells have also emerged out of practices in the temples in Bali, which is essentially a kind of a Hindu-based culture there. Although of course it's become quite unique in terms of how that's evolved on the island of Bali, and but you know is also essentially part of the sacred tradition from Indonesia in that way. And these brass harmony balls that Karen Kingston has also brought over from Bali and makes them available through her website are also wonderful instruments that are used for in a whole variety of ways. For energy and space clearing. And also some people use them for even diagnostic, for assessing energy imbalances as well. So that's another one. We've also got some silver harmony balls that we use as well. So the silver ones have a slightly different sound. So again, just slightly higher, perhaps slightly more ethereal sounding, slightly more delicate. And then also, we also have little silver harmony balls that are as pendants, so that they go on to necklaces and create very delicate little sounds. And I know Jane's a great fan of these, and that's one you're wearing right now, isn't it? So you really like to use those, don't you, in your treatment sometimes with people? And
yes. It's very quiet and very subtle, and very nice when if I've given a Reiki treatment and at the end you can just use that and it just very gently and subtly brings them back. It's such a gentle sound. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and then of course we have what we're calling they're called bar chimes, and they come in different sizes and different frequencies, and so they are best played with a wooden mallet, a wooden one, so to speak. So, yeah. So that's it played with a wooden
the wooden wand. It can also be played with a rubber wand, and then it kind of holds the fundamental tone, which in fact, in this case, this is an Om chime that we're playing here. So that's 136.1 hertz. So it holds, playing it with the rubber wand, holds the fundamental tone for a long period of time. In fact, it's still going on and on. Whereas tapping it with the wooden wand, the wooden mallet, brings out the overtones of it as well. Just tap it again. So this is quite a long chime, and it's great. It can be used in a whole variety of ways. We'll talk a bit more about that. But again, with these other things, it can be used diagnostically, and they're really good in group situations as well. And then we have, alongside that, we've got other forms of chimes. So we've got the koshi chimes, which is essentially a chime made in France and has this bamboo outer, and then so it creates these wonderful tones. Inside the chime, there are these tuned, essentially, times, which is a bit like a little tuning forks in there, and a ball that, as you move the chime, the ball touches these times and creates the sound. And these koshi chimes, there are 4 of them actually. There's one for terra or earth element. There's the aqua or water element. There's arya or air, and ignis or fire. And these times are all tuned quite precisely. And so you can see there that with each of them, there's a different combination of notes. So it's almost as if they've got their own mode of sounds associated with each of them. So we were playing there the terra one, and so it's a lovely sounding instrument. And then alongside that, we've got we can also play these mounted bar chimes that are, you know, a bit more commonly used as a kind of percussion instrument in orchestras and in musical scores more generally. So these can be integrated into the one-to-one treatment sessions as well as the group sessions. And hopefully you can hear that they've got a lovely, subtle, delicate sound, and create a wonderful soundscape. Okay. So let's just move on quickly and to consider how we can work with these sound therapy instruments to assess the energy fields of clients. Now, if you want, I mean, we have videos of this, so you can catch up on this on other videos as well. But essentially, what we're doing is for the in-person or the one-to-one work with individual clients, is that if you have a client lying down on a futon or a mat or a couch or a bed, then we can use them to play over the body in the energy fields and the subtle energy fields over the body. So, for example, we can use a bell like a Balinese bell, or indeed any of these instruments. So we can use the chimes or the tingshas or the bells or the harmony balls to sound them over and around the body. And then we can listen for the differences in the qualities of the sounds. And so now Fabio Maman, the Tao of Sound, and based on his 30-odd years of work with sound healing, particularly with tuning forks, but I think this applies more widely. He's just got a classification of the subtle energy bodies around the physical body, including the etheric, the astral, the mental, the causal, the buddhic, and the atmic. And it's almost as if there are these spheres of energy, different types of energy, going from the more subtle on the outside into the more dense and the physical. And the point being is that there are lots of aspects that affect the quality of this energy, these energy fields, including the cosmic energy, you could say, from the stars and the planets, as well as our sun and moon, and as well as the influence of sounds from different instruments and our voices. And of course, the physical body and the subtle energy fields within the body are also emitting electromagnetic signals that emerge out into the subtle energy fields. And so we can pick up on the quality of the sounds through the use of these instruments to, in a sense, assess the state of the energy fields inside the body. So the chakras and the meridians, for example. And so based on that kind of way of thinking, now we know that these subtle energy fields are not fully formed circles like that. These are like fields that just move about and interweave and interpenetrate each other. So it's not a completely fixed thing. But the etheric field, that's the area that's up to 15 centimeters roughly, or 6 inches, closest to the physical body, is mostly influenced, according to Fabio Maman, by the pure vibration of the sound instruments or our voices. So it's very good to get into this zone between naught, from the skin essentially up to about 15 centimeters, for the vibrational effects to take an effect throughout the whole body, going through the skin into the connective tissues, into the muscles, into the bones, into the cells, and right down to the DNA. Now, the astral body, which is this next layer up, roughly from about 15 centimeters up to about 30 centimeters, is, in his experience, extremely susceptible to the vibration of audible sound. Okay, so we know that the audible sound range is roughly from about 20 hertz up to about 20,000. And we know that the range on a typical concert piano these days is round about 27 hertz up to round about 4,100 hertz. So that would be, so all of the sounds that we're using generally in sound therapy, all the ones that we're talking about here, the instruments talking about here, are all in this audible sound range. The vibrations that lie outside that, which are, say, below the 20 hertz, are the extra low frequency ones, or the ultrasound, or the infrasounds, and the ones above that, above 20,000 hertz, are the ultrasounds. And all of these vibrations have an impact through the etheric energy field into the physical body as well. But in the audible sound range, with these instruments that we're using on our voices, this is also very effective in the astral field. So I think that's quite important to remember that, so that we can work very effectively up to about 30 centimeters above the body. And then above that, he calls this the mental. Some people call this the emotional field. So, but this is also up to between about 30 and 45 centimeters or 18 inches. This one is particularly influenced by color. And so, of course, we can introduce various ways of working with color into that field alongside the sounds. And we'll talk more about that on another webinar. But that gives you an idea about what we're talking about here. So let's then think about how we can work with these instruments to balance the energy fields of the clients. So just having a little struggle here with the computer. So we're going to look particularly at chakra balancing. Okay, so you've probably seen this chart before, and I'm just making the point again, is that each of the chakras, the root, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, brow, third eye, and crown, has qualities that emerge in our being depending on whether the chakras are balanced or whether they have more of an excess or deficient level of energy. And so just taking one, for example, if we look at the heart chakra, we can see that if it's in a balanced energy state, then relationships will be flourishing. We will have a great sense of empathy, compassion, and sharing. But if it's in a deficient energy state, then we're likely to be feeling or aware of symptoms of, or maybe not, but they'll be around paranoia. There'll be a fear of rejection, a need for constant reassurance, and indecisiveness. But if it's in excess, then there's likely to be qualities of us being over-demanding or over-critical or even over-empathetic, and therefore getting into this kind of pattern of always trying to being over kind of empathizing and being over compassionate and being over giving in a sense and overbearing in that way. So this quality of deficiency and excess is one that really draws on the whole framework of working with subtle energies that's emerged out of Taoism, out of Chinese acupuncture, and the way that is also then emerged and developed in other Eastern countries such as Japan, as it's used in shiatsu, which I'm very familiar with. So this is a whole kind of way of working and applying it now to the chakras, and with working with sounds in this way that is very, very powerful, I found, and many others find too. So it's worthwhile remembering this, getting familiar with this chart, and then using this as a way to help with the working with your clients. And so in terms of using the instruments, and you can do this for yourself, you can practice with your own with your instruments and your own body and your own self and being, but the excess energy is going to sound, if you can establish a kind of a normal sound with any one of these instruments. So let's say I was to pick up the tingsha in this case, then we could just hold it, we can play the sound, hold it away from ourselves or our client, and become aware of the quality of the sound as it is in that state. And then what we're then doing is we're then passing it through up to 30 centimeters above the body, and then listening for, in this case, listening for changes in the quality of the sound. So is it more of the excess nature? So that's going to sound more noisy. There's going to be more active overtones. There's going to be a quality of like a fizzing sound, or there might even be an increase in the vibrations of the instrument that you hold in your hand. So this could be the tingshas, it could be the bell, it could be any of these harmony balls or chimes. You know, you might just be aware, you might be that your kinesthetic awareness is as strong, or if not stronger, than your auditory awareness. And so you'll be aware of the changes in the quality of the vibrations in your hands. Now, the deficiency of the energy field of the chakra, for example, is going to sound quieter. So the sound will drop away, it will become more dull, it might even cut out. And there might be a decrease in the vibrations of the instrument in your hand. So if you identify either and or an excess or a deficiency, then we can then use the same instrument or any of these other instruments that we work with in the sound healing, the sound therapy process, to correct the excess and deficiency. And we can talk more about all those different techniques on other webinars, but it's making the point that we can use these instruments for this diagnosis, as well as, in a sense, clearing the energy and helping to restore more balance too. Now, some of you are aware that I've recently been promoting Eileen McCusick, and indeed we had a conversation with her by Skype, a live conversation with her on the last workshop in Glastonbury that I did a couple of weeks ago as part of the workshop. And she's written this book called Tuning the Human Biofield. I think it was out at the end of just in 2013 or 2014. And she has this way of not only working with tuning forks for assessing the quality of energy fields, which is really interesting and definitely worthwhile checking out, but also has this map relating to the chakras too, relating to as if the client is lying face up, then the right side relates to the masculine domain and the left to the feminine, and that there are different qualities associated with imbalances in the energy fields that we can pick up through these instruments as well that relate to the different chakras. So if there are imbalances around the root chakra, for example, on the right side, then that would be characteristic with the qualities of the person or us being, overdoing things, being too busy. But whereas if it's on the left side, then that's likely to be accompanied by us being plagued by thoughts and feelings about what we want to do but aren't doing. So it's almost like the opposite. And what's happening there, Jane?
I'm just thinking, I sometimes do both.
You said, yeah. Well, I think that's the thing about all of these things, and like the other chart as well. When I look at the qualities of balance, deficiency, and excess in relation to the chakras of these things, it's kind of like these have all been present in me and in my life at times from one time to another. And I think that's the nature of the energy fields. And when we are out of balance, then different aspects of these things can pop up and be with us. And so thinking about looking at the brow there, the tendency to think about the past and be caught in the past would be more on the right side in balance, whereas worrying about the future would be on the left side. Now, how many of us, get into both of this rather than just living in the present moment, which would be much more of a balanced quality? So we can jump from one to the other. And but yeah, so it's really interesting. But it could be that we have a pattern of these one or more of these things being more evident and more chronic in our lives, and therefore these patterns could be picked up, and we can work with these instruments to heal them. Now, another thing that we talked about with Eileen was how we can work with sound to do distant assessments and treatment as well. And I think this is really interesting. And I know that people like, Jane, I mean, you're a Reiki master, so you've done level 3, or what, 20 years ago or more now. So you've been working with Reiki a long time. And it's kind of well established in Reiki, I believe, isn't it? That distant Reiki is just as powerful often as the in-person Reiki.
Oh, it is, yes. You can send it not only across distance, but across time as well.
Yeah.
So you can send it in the past to help heal the past, to help heal the present.
Yeah.
As well as sending it ahead of you in the future to a situation you're concerned about.
Yeah, which is quite extraordinary, isn't it? That, yeah, I mean, I remember being involved in an experiment, a Reiki experiment once, where I was asked to sit down quietly, and I think it was 1 o'clock on a Sunday, and I was told to just kind of, just to see what came up, and then later on, when I was kind of called back into the room and got involved in the experiment, I was told that actually the experiment had happened at 10 o'clock that morning, and in the same time zone, and therefore they were just sending it into the future in that case. And I picked up on the kind of the qualities of this red-colored symbol that I wasn't exposed to Reiki at that time. I didn't really know anything about the symbols then. And so to me, that kind of was a real wow moment. But you've had it going in reverse as well. So it can even go kind of backwards in time. Yeah, amazing. And so it seems that we can do this also. We can also carry out these assessments with these tools as if the client, who we might be, have talked to on the phone or on Skype, might be on the other side of the world or in a different country. And we can create the space to as if they were there present in the room, because these energy fields, the aura, it actually is non-local. It does extend out across time and space, and therefore it can be picked up and assessed and analyzed distantly as well, like this. I mean, you also do this with kinesiology, is that right? Not just not just with Reiki.
Well, with kinesiology, you can use a surrogate, so somebody else becomes the body that you work on, but you call in the energy body of the one who needs the treatment.
Yeah.
And really, I first started doing that many, many years ago, something as an experiment when my friend's daughter, who was living in Cornwall at the time when I was in Somerset, was having tremendous emotional problems. And it was actually her suggestion, although she's only about 5 or 6, to phone me up to ask if I could help.
Yeah.
So I was living in a house share, and I got my housemate to lie on my treatment couch, and I asked for this girl's energy to come forward, and I did a treatment, and I felt things happen, and I felt, you know, I was getting some sort of interesting readings from it, and so I thought, oh well, that should have done something. I didn't expect what happened the next day when I had a phone call from her mum saying it was like she had her daughter back. All this angst and anger and upset seemed to have dissipated overnight. She got up sunny as anything and was like a changed girl, and it had worked. And
Wonderful.
after that, I realised the power of doing the distant treatment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I know that Eileen was talking about in her experience, you know, this was all done as an experiment. You know, we kind of can't believe somehow that, you know, I know in this case we're talking about working with sounds, but, you know, the mechanics of sounds is that it needs a medium to travel through, like the air or water or even the solid floor or so on. And the sound basically doesn't travel very far. The actual sound doesn't travel very far. But it does seem as if we can, in this way, and it's worth experimenting yourselves, we can work distantly in this way on the energy body of the client as if they were in the room, and the vibrations of the sound instruments do have an effect in the same way that working with kinesiology, for example, in that case, which you can include sounds, actually, you can incorporate sounds into kinesiology as you can with Reiki. So it's all part and parcel of the same sort of thing. So I think this is definitely worth pursuing and experimenting with as we go forward with this. Okay, so let's now move on. So let's look at how we can work with these instruments to do energy and space clearing in rooms and buildings. So we'll be bringing in Jane here as well for this, because you have a lot of experience of this over the years. So I mentioned about Karen Kingston. In 1996, she wrote this book called Creating Sacred Space with Feng Shui. And very much part of her work involved incorporating particularly Balinese bells and these harmony balls, but other instruments as well, into this whole process of creating sacred space. And there's definitely a book that's worth, a resource that's worth looking at. So why do we want to bother with this anyway, as part of this sound healing, sound therapy course? Now, I think the point is that it's important to always clear the space that you're going to be working in, so you can have a fresh start for the session, whether it's one-to-one at the start of the day, one-to-one work, or whether you're working in a group environment. So it's always good to clear the space so that you've got a fresh start, the energy is nice and clean and clear, and you can get going with it, and it's going to flow more smoothly. And then it's very important that at the end of the session, at the end of each session between clients or at the end of a group session, that we need to do this kind of space clearing or energy space clearing work to avoid getting a kind of the energy getting stuck, any negative energy that might be around getting stuck and kind of, in a sense, disrupting and making things not flow so smoothly. So it's important to clear it then. And then, of course, we can also do this kind of work for others, for other people, to clear energy, clear the space. And as Jane will be talking about, also be clearing about, what do you call them? Unwanted entities or
earthbound spirits.
Earthbound spirits.
Or entities. Sometimes they're not human. Yeah.
So this is like an additional service to the one-to-one work and the group sound therapy work that you can do to get extra income. Although I think you're probably not going to be recommending that people try and take on dealing with earthbound spirits unless they've got a bit of background in this. Is that right?
Yes, I would say so.
But for general energy clearing work, you know, it's pretty straightforward, and we can deal with that. So the main principles here is that what we're talking about very much about working with both intention and the frequency of the instrument. So it's putting those two together, that in this case we're not just getting the healing, but we're getting the clearing as well. So the intention is a really important part. Now, some key things to do would be to set up an altar into the space in which you're working, and you can use your sound therapy instruments along with things like candle and an incense holder and so on as part of the altar. And this is a very personal thing that people can set up for themselves. I'd recommend that it's always good before you start to say a prayer, to invite in whatever your guides or your higher self, or your God or the goddess, whatever it is for you, source energy, and to, in a sense, kind of do kind of a blessing of the space, guided by your higher self in that way, as part of a prayerful approach. And then absolutely set the intention before you get going. So the intention what kind of intentions might be appropriate here, Jane, do you think?
In what context?
Well, in the context of space clearing, energy and space clearing of a room.
Well, I mean, it would depend if I was actually clearing a room.
Yeah.
My intention would simply be that the room would be, the energy would be cleared of anything negative, and it would be a protected space.
Yeah.
And it's like a neutral space that you start to work in, where you know that anything that's brought there can then be released from there safely, but the person isn't going to come into something that's already full of a negative stuck energy, or some energy from the previous client who might have had a huge release.
Yeah.
So people can pick up other people's energy, and I can talk about that in a little while.
Great. So thank you. So so then we create the sounds, and I think you'll be talking about which parts of the rooms are important to go around and all of that. So and then we can then also do some, we can burn some white sage, and I think Jane will be demonstrating this as well in a few minutes when we come back to the video. So just to be clear, there are some contraindicators of when it's good, when it's important not to be doing this energy or space clearing. So if you or if you've got strong feelings of fear, anxiety, or you're feeling threatened, then it's best not to kind of take this on at that time. Also, if you're feeling physically ill or tired or very depressed, it's also not good to take on doing energy space clearing work for others. I mean, you can still be kind of clearing your own space and getting it ready, even if you're not feeling too great. It's important to do it, but this is more when you're doing paid work for other people that we're talking about here. So if you are feeling ill on the day, it's probably best to just reschedule it for another day when you're going to be feeling better. You do need to get permission from the owner for this, so you can't just go charging off into buildings without their permission into the room. So that's very important. It's also suggested that it's not a great idea to be doing this if you're pregnant, and also if you've got open wounds on your body at the time, and also if the space or yourself, but more importantly perhaps the space, is actually extremely physically dirty. So it makes sense for you or the owners to give it a physical clean first. And then if there are things around like open food, jewelry, a lot of jewelry and other metal objects, it's important to remove them. If there's things like TV or other recorded music playing, then it's important to get them switched off, removed from the space, so to speak. Any pets that might be scared by the sounds that you're going to make, or indeed any sick people, get them out of the room and invite them to be somewhere else at the time that you're working. Great, so that's a few words about the energy or space healing. So just going to touch in a little bit on using these instruments in groups, and then we'll be closing down this part of the webinar and moving on to Jane. So now all of these instruments can be used effectively. So just as an example, here's a picture of Harry Parkinson, who now has a diploma with us. He lives in Dublin and Ireland, and on a recent workshop, which was actually about crystal singing bowls, he was doing a sound bath with them, and he uses these chimes, these long bar chimes, particularly effectively at the beginning of a session, in a sense, to kind of open up the space. He also uses them at other times as well, and many other people do this too. So they're great it's great to play an energy chime at the start of the session. So that's a really good thing. Now these mounted bar chimes, you can play these at any time throughout the session according to what you feel drawn to, and you don't have to be playing them for any of these for very long. They can be part of an integrated process. So just a few, even half a minute or a couple of minutes playing with any of these instruments, absolutely fine, and but can create some really lovely sounds and are very effective. And then recently at a workshop just a couple of weeks ago, there's a few of us got together for another group what I call spirit sounds in Glastonbury. And so we had Phil playing on the flute, Rosha playing the crystal bowls, I was playing gongs and tuning forks, in fact. Kathy there, Marsheka doing voice work, and Chai playing drums. Now, so we did all of these different sounds, and then right at the end, Chai picked up a koshi chime and used the koshi chime at the end of the session. So it's a really appropriate way to finish a session. It's a beautiful, soft, gentle sound, and you know, it's a really lovely way to finish the group session. In fact, it's also a great way to finish the end of a one-to-one session as well. So they're a really beautiful way to finish. And also on another occasion, a similar occasion there, Kathy Marsheka also used harmony balls to in a sense, to end the session as well. So they're also wonderful to use like that, just to kind of calm and smooth the energy at the end. So that gives you a bit of a pointer there. So just finally, you know, just a few bits about it. Let's, I'll just go back to that actually. Whoops, so getting a bit ahead of itself here. A lot of these instruments, you can just use warm water plus maybe a dash of lemon juice to give them a clean, and then wipe them off with a cloth so that they don't get stained with the liquid. You can also do the energy clearing a bit more energetically with crystals or incense, herbs, resin sprays, and also your visualization. And the next steps to take, so do practice listening to outer and any inner sounds that you may be becoming aware of. It's the listening that's important in this context. The more sensitive you are, the more practiced you are at listening, the better you'll be as a sound therapist. And write up your experiences with these bells, chimes, tingshas, and harmony balls in the sound therapy journal. Even if you've kind of qualified, it's really good to do this work. But if you are working on the certificate and or the diploma level, then you do need to be writing up your answers to the exercises in the workbooks. So, as always, love what you do, make a difference, help others with healing sounds today. So thank you very much for listening to this part of the webinar with the slides. We're now going to go back to the live room where Jane will be talking a bit more about her experiences with energy and space clearing. Okay, so over to you again.
I look a bit shadowy. I'm just moving back into the light. I think it's, I'm still looking a bit shadowy, but never mind. So yes, energy clearing. Now it's quite interesting because everybody is a receptor of energy as well as giving out energy. And if you're not sure just how much of that is the case, just think about, you can walk into any building and you know whether that building feels good to you or not. People say it's atmosphere, but you will feel that energy. And it's very easy to pick up the energy of others. If you ever walk around a very busy shopping centre and you come back feeling rather drained, the chances are you've actually pulled energy from a number of other people that you've walked past. And so you also have to clean your own energy field if you're very sensitive to that. I had been called out in the past to a number of houses that were seen as sick houses. And to give you a couple of examples, one lady bought a house. It was actually an old mill, and it's quite a large property. And she said she felt she couldn't actually sleep in the house. She thought the energy. And it turned out that the history of the house was it went on the market because the owners of the house, a lady and her second husband, they'd split up there, and they'd split up because she found that her second husband, who was the stepfather to her children, had been abusing the children. And the worst part of the house was the upstairs where all this had taken place. So most of the houses I'd been called to were because of somebody dying and because of haunting, but in this case it was simply the bad energy made the house feel dire. And so I actually worked on the house to clear the energy field, and the end result was it felt amazing. I mean, it actually seemed to be lighter, and the woman concerned said as soon as I'd finished she knew that she could stay in the house, and it was like the whole place felt different. And she did then redecorate and make it look absolutely beautiful, and it became a happy family home again. And another house I was called to, which was a rather sick house, the owner of that house had let the house to a friend of hers who had had a massive depression there. And when my friend came back to reclaim her home, she said everything kept breaking. All the electrical appliances kept breaking. Things literally kept falling off the walls. Things that had been there for many years were falling off the walls. And she said she just felt it was all wrong. It wasn't like her house. So nothing dire had happened. It was simply that this young woman who'd stayed there was going through a very hard time. She was very down. Her energy had kind of permeated the whole property, and it just needed a bit of a clean up. So again, I just did what I do when I'm energy clearing a property, and there was no problem after that. Nothing fell off the wall, nothing else broke, and all was well. So simply speaking, when I'm doing an energy clearing, I actually start off, I suppose the most important thing is the intention of what you're doing. But if I'm doing a whole house, I actually generally do every single nook and cranny in that house, even the loft, if I can get in it, every cupboard, every room. And I start usually at the top of the house and work my way down. And I basically take one room at a time. And I start off with clapping in the corners, which may sound a bit crazy, but energy actually gathers in corners. I suppose ideally we would live in circular houses and then you wouldn't have any energy stuck in a corner, but most houses have corners, at least 4 to a room, and some have more. So it's simply a case of going into each corner and clapping loudly, and that helps to break up stuck energy. My next move would be to actually use white sage. It's very powerful, and Native Americans were very fond of using this. In fact, the stuff I use does come from America, via Glastonbury. So with this, the important thing to remember, if you're burning white sage, you do need something. I can't see whether I'm on the screen here or not, but you do need something underneath it, because it does have a habit of dropping off and burning holes in carpets. And I know this from my experiences in my own house, where I've got quite a few holes in carpets. So you simply light the end, and it burns beautifully. And I think it smells lovely. I will warn you, a lot of people think it does smell a little of cannabis, and they think you've just been smoking pot in the room. Well, what I would do with this is to actually go around the room, to circumnavigate the room clockwise 3 times, just walking slowly around, wafting this around the room. I shan't do it in here because I'll be disappearing off the screen at some point, but that's what I would do with that. But I say always remembering to have something underneath it in case you want to, well, as I say, I have actually burnt a few carpets in my time.
Yeah.
So after doing the white sage, which is a very, very powerful cleanser, then I would introduce some sounds. Now, I have used a Tibetan bowl for this, or I have used a bell, such as this one, which actually has the dorje at the top. And then again, I would actually go to each corner and ring the bell once in each corner, and then in the center of the room. So say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then, after I've done that, I will actually visualize the silver violet flame of Saint Germain just filling the whole space, which is a great one for dispelling any negativity and transmuting it into a positive energy. And after that, I usually like to then fling the windows open as well and just let air flow into the room. But I actually would do each room in the house, and I'd even go into cupboards and just anywhere. and just clear the whole building. And all the properties I've actually worked on have certainly felt better, and the people who have reported the problems have actually gone away. A number of the cases of problem buildings I have been called to have been more because there've been some sort of disturbance there. In some cases, it's definitely been a haunting. And in one case, I was actually called in because they'd actually had a priest coming every week for months to this property, and nothing ever seemed to change. And it was one of those houses where so many strange things were happening. There were apparitions appearing, things moving, instruments playing themselves, and other instruments not being able to be played. Notably, the keyboard, the lead for the keyboard disappeared every time they got a new one. So they got the impression that whoever it was who was also living there on another dimensional realm didn't like the music that the teenager made. There was a lot of things went on in that house. And the woman who lived there phoned me, talking in a whisper, terrified that whoever or whatever it was that was living there with her would hear, and said she was at her wit's end. And I said, well, I'd come along and see what I could do, thinking, well, obviously, you know, she's had this person coming in regularly and it must be quite a difficult case. And the interesting thing was, one of the apparitions that was seen was a hooded monk. And that was the only one that I didn't find there. So I think that was the only one that actually really liked the priest who was coming around and moved on. I did find there was a couple of soldiers there. That was from the time of Cromwell, so they'd been there a long time. There was one of the original residents of the house, which was from about 1700 or earlier. And there was a very, very angry man who seemed to just stay at the top of the stairs most of the time. So my job in that case, and it was a house with a very choice atmosphere, was actually to talk to each of the individuals concerned and kind of sell them heaven, really, and tell them there was somewhere better for them to be and assist them on their way. And actually, it all went very well, although one of them was a bit tricky, and it took me an hour sitting on the stairs with him before he would go. But I was very pleased to hear that afterwards the lady told me there was absolutely no problems at all. And she said she didn't have the heart to cancel the priest who was coming the following week because they'd had this long-standing arrangement. And this person who arrived, the member of the clergy, said, oh, what I did last time must have worked because this is now a clear house. So I was quite proud of myself there, because there was quite a lot who'd been there for a long time. So some of the energy clearing work has involved dealing with earthbound spirits. However, I have done all the other things. Once I had moved them out, I would then clap out the corners, I would use the white sage, I would use the bells, I would use the silver violet flame, and I'd do all of that. But doing all of that without actually making contact with the earthbounds and finding out what their issues were and what was holding them, I know that it wouldn't have worked. It would have done more or less what the priest had done and put them out in the garden for a bit until they come back in. And so there's a little bit more to it than just doing the sounds to actually move on someone who's got a serious problem. Because if somebody's stuck, there is a reason why they're stuck. I used to think of them as my out-of-body clients, really, and I just treated them like any client who came to me with an issue. And I'd find out why it was they were held. And I was fortunate, or am fortunate enough, that I can see and hear enough in other dimensions to do that. And it is wonderful work. So if you feel that that's for you, it is something that can be developed, and you can develop your sensitivity. Although I will say it's not always for the faint-hearted.
Great. Oh, thanks for that, Jane. I think it's yeah, so some really interesting and useful examples there of the kind of work that you can do with energy and space clearing. And so thank you, and all involving sound along with these other things as well.
Yes, indeed.
Great. So I'm just now, you know, kind of coming back to what people might have written, any questions or comments people have made. So yeah, you'd be interested to hear that Janice from who I think is over in America said, I've used sound at a distance using a proxy stroke teddy bear, and with great results. Wow. So you don't even need to have a have a live proxy. It seems like a live human. We can just work with teddy bears.
Yes, that's a part of a Reiki training as well. When you're first learning to do your distant healing, is to actually have a teddy bear, because it gives you something to hold and to sort of see that as your person.
Yeah. If you're still there, Janice, it'd be nice to know, what kind of results you've had. So, if you're welcome to just write some words about that, that'd be really interesting. So that's good. There was a question earlier. I'm just seeing if I can find it. Yeah, from Sandra. She was saying, which part is the dorji? So I think you were pointing to the dorji part on top of the bell.
Yes. So this is if I can put this, I put it so you can see there. So that's like a double dorji. You can see it's got one either end. And this bell, whoops, I get it up to there. You can see it's got the same.
Put to the side so you can see it against.
Oh yes, hang on. It's like, it's really strange because you put it one way and it goes the other. There, you can see the dorji on the top of the bell, like that double one there.
Great. Great. Oh yeah, so Sandra was saying thanks. I saw where the dorji was while Jane was demonstrating. Yeah, never mind. That's great. Sure. Okay. So Penny, so Anastasia was saying they actually sell Reiki teddy bears now.
Do they?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well,
I wonder how they're different from your common garden teddy bear.
They're obviously very special ones, aren't they? Yeah. So Penny's saying, why is blood and open wounds an issue with space clearing? Well, I think it's just generally that, my sense of it and my understanding also from Karen Kingston's work is that this is, it just helps. It's like the energy, is not contained within ourselves. It's the chance of our own energy kind of spilling out and also other energy coming into us. So it's as if it's we need to just have a have a good boundary, is my sense of it, around ourselves, because in order to do this kind of space clearing work without even getting into dealing with earthbound spirits, we need to have a strong sense of self and a strong sense of boundary. I don't know, do you have any impression about that, Jane, around the open wounds? And
I mean, I've never sort of been in a situation where I've had an open wound when I've been doing this kind of work. I think there's also energetically, certain things can be very attracted to blood, and that they can be quite negative. So I'm not going to get into all the realms of the dark and dastardly, but there is that thing of it. You are more likely to be attracting some negative energy in if you have open wounds. I think that's where it would stem from.
Yeah, it would stem from that. That's right. So it's like having a sense of a boundary, a strong boundary around yourself. It's like a protection thing.
Well, yes, if you're dealing with what I call a sick house, one where something dire has happened, or one where there's entities there which are negative, then you do need to be very clear in yourself and very contained, because you don't want to be someone who's actually picking up that energy. You're there simply to move the energy on and stay pure and clear yourself. Yeah.
Thanks for that. That's great. Okay, so so Janice was then coming back with a few more words, saying a time was set, a sensitive client experienced energy movement. She knew when the session ended. So that's one, I think. Another used her auric photograph set up before and after a distant session with observable changes, in other words, color shifts. And she also knew when the session ended. Oh, thank you, Janice. Thanks for sharing that. That's a really great example of kind of almost like giving some form of more like objective assessment, objective proof to show, to quantify the changes. So there was actually changes in her aura as before and after. So that's fantastic. That's really good. And so Ramona was saying, is it safe to use sounds on young children and babies? Well, absolutely it is. It's very safe. I mean, sounds are the kind of sounds that we're working with here, especially if we're not playing them loud, and just quietly and gently. are really there. It's safe on everyone, old, young, babies, even babies, you know, in the fetus in the womb. You know, it's really good for everyone. So no need to worry about anything there, Ramona. Just go ahead and use them if you have them or if you're working with them. So Anna was saying, the silver violet flame, do you just close your eyes and visualize it, or what do you do there, Jane?
Yes, I actually, I can visualize it with my eyes open or my eyes closed. But if you find it easier to visualize with your eyes closed, then do that. When I'm using the silver violet flame, I actually start in my heart. It's like I visualize it here first, and I spread it out throughout my own body and my own aura, which pushes, if you like, and transmutes any energy, negative energies that I don't want out. But then I just expand it out and fill the whole space. And sometimes I actually then not only do the room, I then will do the whole building. And then sometimes I will then expand it out and do the town, the country, and then the world. I get a bit carried away with the violet flaming. But certainly in a house, I would do each room individually. And then at the end, I would do the whole building, every part of it, even above and below ground.
Yeah, great, great. Do you want to just say a few words about the silver violet flame itself? What it is and why you use it in this context?
Well, the violet flame was, if you like, a gift to the world from Saint Germain, and it is a colour, and the intention behind that is that it will actually transmute negative energy, and it can just help change sort of what I call stuck energy and shift things on. And the silver came in a bit later on, which is really the silver ray of grace. So it's adding, if you like, divine grace into that picture. So making it a silver violet flame, you have that transmuting thing with the element of grace within it.
Great.
So that's why there's now the kind of combination that's used. So I sometimes it kind of, I got used to using the violet flame, and then when the silver came in, it took me a while to do the two. And sometimes it seems almost easier to do one and then do the other rather than to get both together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I kind of got used
if
to
you
it.
move back a little bit, you'll catch the light on your face a bit better, I think. Perhaps.
I think we should actually sort the lighting out in here so we have light coming at us. I realise I can see myself on screen looking like this shadowy figure. I was wearing quite bright colours, but you wouldn't know.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So thanks for that. So yeah. So you're saying you don't just close your eyes and visualize it. Sometimes you also have them open.
Yes.
Okay, so Vanessa was saying, hi Jane, do you ever use your voice when space clearing?
That's an interesting one, because actually I'm trying to remember now, and I cannot think of one time when I've used my voice. When I've been actually clearing a building, I have insisted that everybody leave the room that I'm working in. I haven't been able to get everybody out the building. In one case, I did a multi-story block of flats. I was doing 50 flats, and there was builders in there at the time, so I had to keep moving people out of the space. And when I'm in a room, it's very, very hard to pick up on subtle energies when you have a living, breathing person in the room, because their energies are so much stronger. And so I would tend to move the people out and have it in complete silence, and then I could tune in and start to feel, because sometimes I hear in other dimensions, sometimes I see, and sometimes I physically feel what's there. I never quite know how I'm going to get the images or the messages, and so I'm usually very quiet until I actually get the bells out at the end. I've never used my voice.
What about when you're talking to the earthbounds? Do you actually talk to them with your voice, or is it all done in your head? So
I do it in my head, because I hear them in my head.
Yeah.
And so I've never spoken out loud, but I'm having usually a constant dialogue on another level.
Yeah. Great. So Anna was saying, thanks Jane, very interesting, that's very helpful. Anastasia was saying, this is coming back to the bleeding, so a woman shouldn't do a clearing if she's having her cycle. Is that something that should be avoided?
I did read that somewhere, that it wasn't recommended.
Yeah, well, that's what we've been saying on the basis with Karen Kingston was saying
Yes,
that
so
as well. Yeah.
yes, on the basis of that.
Mm.
I always felt myself that seemed a bit extreme.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's something to bear in mind. It also depends, I think, because sometimes for some women, when it's their time of the month, they cannot feel at their best.
Yeah.
In the olden days when I had periods, I certainly felt pretty lousy then, and I probably wouldn't have been in the best state, but everybody is different.
So what about, you know, kind of without getting into it too much, this kind of the blood issue again, and the, you know, attracting negativity and so on?
Well, that was just something that I'd read somewhere. I have no experience of it myself personally, but because I did a lot of work at one time with entities of various sorts, and some of those were fairly negative, I was warned that they would, you know.
Do you think there's any difference then between having an open wound or you know, having a period as a woman being in the cycle in that sense? Or, you know, should it be treated in the same way, or is there a difference, do you think?
I think according to some people, from what I've read, they would say that it's not ideal if you're bleeding in any way.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's just, as I have no experience of it, you know, having any negative impact on anything that I've done, but that's just something that I've certainly read. And if you're not feeling at your best, it's really not your time to take on clearing entities or, you know, sick houses.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fine just to clean up your own room.
Yeah, for sure.
Because actually,
you've got to keep doing it, haven't you?
Well, when I was working, I would actually clear the room between every client.
Absolutely, of course.
Even if it's just a quick silver violet flame at least, and often a quick whiz round with either incense or an Orosoma pomander, which smells wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'd always do a little something at the end of every session, so that it felt like I had a clean start.
I always use like a bit of tincture or something, just to clear it, or a bit of bell, something like that. Yeah, absolutely. You need to do it at the end of every session. So whether you've got an open wound or you're bleeding or not, you've still got to do it, haven't you?
And you can't, as a woman, you can't just stop work for a quarter of your life.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you've got lots of people saying thanks very much, and it's really good. Susanna here, who I think you know from Ij.
Oh yes.
Was saying, thank you, Tony, thank you, Jane. I love your stories. I would like to ask for a few more words on sound changes you have spotted, especially in that chaotic and negative house you worked on. Did you notice any changes in the sound? So I don't know, maybe there was the whole stuff with the instruments going off, wasn't there? Maybe they changed, did they?
I think at that time, I wasn't working so much with the instruments, and I can't say that I was really tuning into the difference in the sound, other than by the time I finished, it always seemed to be very clear. By the time I got to the center of the room where I do my final ding, I always got a really good clear ding by the end of it. But I was using the sound at the end. It was like I felt my clearing had happened through shaking up the energy with all the clapping, and using the white sage burning around the room. Then there's the silver violet flame in my intention, and then the sound, it was almost like putting, in my mind, this really positive vibration into the room. And by the time, for every part of the room, just almost like leaving something really positive behind in a clear space. And so I wasn't aware of the sound changing so much, but I was always aware that I did a really good final loud bing or ding, or depending on what I was using, in the middle of the room. But
then it sounded kind of really resonant and very clear and very pure. So the quality of the sound was actually important at that point. Is what you're saying. So,
and I've certainly been aware when I've been working with the sound instruments that when the energy is dull, the sound is duller. So you can hear a difference.
You can hear a difference. It's true. Yeah, great. Okay, there's Mary is saying, I use the Reiki Hosanna clearing with Saint Germain and the angels of the violet flame, and it feels really good. It's now great to have my sound instruments to use alongside this.
Yes.
Thanks, Tony and Jane, for this great webinar. Oh, you're very welcome, Mary.
Yes, thank
you. Very welcome. And so Anastasia was saying, "Oh, sounds great, Mary. What is that?" So, do you know more about that?
I'm sorry, if you just
I used the Reiki Hosanna clearing with Saint Germain and the Angels of the Violet Flame. Anastasia was saying, "What is that?" Oh, so Mary's saying, "I just got a shell from the Indian Ocean, which is great for clearing spaces. Blowing through the circular end creates an extremely loud sound."
Oh, we have one of these.
Yeah.
Perhaps Tony would like to
Oh, no,
demonstrate.
it'd be too loud for this space. But you can get it down just to show what we've got one up there, which is maybe the sort of thing you're talking about. There are many different types of these kind of conch shells, but that's right. And the end actually does have a hole that you can blow through it. I'm really not going to do it now because it'll blow all the microphones.
Yeah. Yes, it can be quite loud.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. Really good for helping to clear spaces. I think that's probably your point there, Mary, isn't it, as well? And Rosie's saying, "Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Jane. Fascinating talk and stories. Loved it. Wish you could come and do my house."
Oh,
she says.
I'd love to. Where are you?
So she's in Oxfordshire. So.
It's quite a long way from Cornwall.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll come and do it someday for you, Rosie. Yeah. Sandra saying, "Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Jane. Really enjoyed the webinar. See you next time." Great. Well, it looks like we're coming to an end, essentially. People seem to be saying lots of thank yous, which is good.
Well,
and
thank you for listening.
No more questions or comments as such. So I guess that's about it for now. Shake is saying, "Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Tony, for this most interesting, informative webinar. Best of wishes till next time." Indeed, it's great to have you back, Shake. It's great to have you here on the webinar and to know you're engaging in all this. So that's really good, as it is for everyone. So I'm really pleased that so many people are here and taking part. And Anne saying, "Really enjoyed this. Thank you both. You're very welcome, Anne." Oh, we're getting lots of thank yous. Susanna saying, "Thank you both, best." Vanessa, "If you do Rosie's, please come my way as well."
Oh, we could do a tour.
Because she's not far away from Rosie.
Oh, right. I thought we were going to be doing a tour of the countryside.
And yeah, we go around cleaning everyone's houses.
Have lots of cups of tea en route. Saying,
"Fantastic. Thank you both for a great webinar. Hugs to all. Hugs to you, Kathy." Marshaka. Ramona saying, "Thank you so much, Jane and Tony, for the great webinar. Definitely be with you next time." Janice saying, "Thank you." Tricia, "Thank you so much." Anastasia, just lots of everyone saying thank you. Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, I feel so thankful.
I think you deserve a special shake of your
little dingle.
Oh, your little dingle. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, everyone, thank you very much. This is being recorded, so you can always watch it again. Oh, Jean saying thanks from Dublin. Nice to know you're there, Jean, as well. It's really great. Tricia from South Africa. So we've got people from all over here. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much again. We'll be in touch with details of the next webinar soon. So bye for now. Bye.